Delivering packages in the South had always been an adventure, especially when the routes took me through the hills and deep into the woods. Most of the time, the folks living in these secluded areas were friendly, embodying that classic, country folk spirit. However, there was one particular delivery that still sends shivers down my spine when I recall it. The address led me down a long gravel street, flanked by only a few houses. As I approached, everything seemed normal, typical country roads with minimal signage. Yet, as I reached the supposed destination, things took an eerie turn. There was no mailbox, no clear driveway, just a faint path carved by the passage of cars. Undeterred, I cautiously navigated my way down what could barely be called a driveway, a treacherous 250-yard stretch surrounded by thick woods. As I inched along in my sizable box truck, anxiety crept in. The terrain was unpredictable, with the ever-present risk of a sudden drop-off. My nerves intensified as I passed an abandoned truck that nature had begun reclaiming. Nothing unusual for the area, but it added to the building sense of unease. The surroundings, now dense with woods, revealed multiple satellite dishes, remnants of past occupants. Drawing closer to the house, it became apparent that it was nothing like the rural abodes I was accustomed to. It resembled a dilapidated cabin from a crime drama, the kind Walter White might hide out in during season 5. I parked, surveying my surroundings for a moment. The atmosphere was eerie, and against my instincts, I decided to complete the delivery swiftly and leave. Approaching the front door, which sported an old-fashioned glass window, I stole glances inside. The main room, devoid of furniture, featured only 2 unfolded metal chairs facing an empty corner. Something felt off, triggering my instincts. With a small package placed at the doorstep, I turned my attention back to my surroundings. The house was a mere shell, a facade of habitation. Taking a moment to assess the situation, I felt an inexplicable presence behind me, growing heavier with every step back to my truck. I removed my hood and hat, expanding my peripheral vision. The feeling persisted, a haunting sensation that urged me to leave immediately. Jumping into my van, I locked the doors, double-checking for any unexpected visitors. As I cautiously backed out of the precarious driveway, a sense of relief washed over me. Yet, the lingering feeling of being watched stayed with me. Driving down the road, about 40 feet from the entrance, I encountered a trash bag in the middle of the street. It was slightly open, revealing what seemed like a woman's sweater. Was this a sinister clue? I slowed down, contemplating the possibilities. Suddenly, the inexplicable took another turn. The trash bag vanished. I scoured the area, but it was as if it had never existed. My mind raced with unsettling thoughts. Was there a sinister plot unfolding in that desolate cabin? I immediately contacted a friend, describing the peculiar encounter. He suggested taking photos upon my return, but when I circled back, the bag had disappeared without a trace. Leaving that job shortly after for unrelated reasons, I informed my boss, who promised to notify the local police and alter the route away from that mysterious address. Despite the assurance, I never received any updates. The unknown lingered, fueled by the memory of the disappearing trash bag. Did they catch wind of my observations, or was it a sinister plot that I narrowly escaped? The unsettling thoughts continue to haunt me, a chilling reminder of the enigmatic dangers that can lurk even in the most rural corners of the country. When I was 16, my friends and I had this go-to spot at a caravan site on the outskirts of town. Jend, one of my buddies, had a little cabin there that his parents owned. It became our sanctuary, a place to unwind, drink, and just chill. We'd spend countless evenings at that cabin, listening to music, playing Xbox, and occasionally throwing a barbecue or a party. It was our haven, a retreat from the monotony of teenage life. One memorable night, we gathered at the cabin to celebrate one of my friend's birthdays. The clock struck around 10 p.m., and we found ourselves running low on alcohol. Being the brave souls among us, Nathan and Tom volunteered to make a late-night run to the nearest corner store to restock our supplies. As they ventured out into the dark night, the rest of us kept ourselves entertained, oblivious to the unexpected turn the night was about to take. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed against the cabin window. My initial reaction was to assume it was Nathan and Tom, trying to spook us upon their return. Grinning from ear to ear, I pulled back the curtains to find darkness outside. Unable to discern anything in the night, I stuck my tongue out playfully and dismissed the noise, confident that our friends would be joining us soon through the unlocked front door. But then, another loud bang on the window disrupted our relaxed atmosphere. This time, a series of violent bangs followed, rattling the sides of the cabin. A man's angry voice pierced through the night, shouting for someone named Boy from outside. Panic set in as realization dawned upon us. This wasn't Nathan and Tom. Jack, brave or perhaps foolhardy, decided to investigate. Opening the door, he was immediately seized by a bald, stocky man in his 40s, who grabbed him by the scruff of his neck. The man was furious, shaking Jack while yelling incoherently. The rest of us stood frozen, helpless witnesses to an unexpected and frightening intrusion. The cabin was suddenly surrounded by more men, banging on the walls and windows. We cowered in the corner, afraid to attract their attention. The situation escalated as one of the men outside threatened to kill Jack repeatedly. We were paralyzed, unsure of what to do in the face of such aggression. Desperation set in, and I tried texting Nathan and Tom, warning them not to return to the cabin. But they had already arrived, and the men were lurking around the back. The fear in that moment was palpable, a feeling of helplessness and impending danger that I never thought I'd experience. Time seemed to stretch as the chaos outside continued. It must have only been about 30 minutes, but it felt like hours before an eerie silence fell over the cabin. Tentatively, we approached the door, cautiously peeking outside. The men and Jack were gone, leaving us bewildered and anxious about our friend's well-being. We found Jack sitting by the river at the far end of the caravan park, head in his hands. Concerned, we approached him, asking if he was okay. However, instead of gratitude or relief, he angrily told us to piss off. The aftermath of that night took a toll on him, and he spiraled into a breakdown, spending most of his time locked away in his room. The repercussions lingered long after that incident. Jack stopped showing up for school, and we later learned about the extent of his struggles from his parents. It was a shocking revelation, a stark reminder that our seemingly carefree escapades had serious consequences. I haven't spoken to Jack in years, and the cabin, once a symbol of carefree teenage nights, remained abandoned after that fateful evening. The unanswered questions about those mysterious men and their intentions haunted us, casting a shadow over the memories of a night that changed everything. In the crisp mid-October air, my friends and I embarked on a weekend adventure to our family's expansive 160-acre property, nestled in the middle of nowhere. Our nearest neighbor was a friendly fellow who occasionally rented our pasture for his cattle. Eager to create a haven away from the hustle and bustle, we aimed to build a cozy cabin on this remote stretch of land. The journey began with me and a buddy, loaded up on a tractor generously lent by his father. We arrived a bit later than planned, the process of loading and organizing taking more time than expected. As we set up our tents and kindled a fire, I stumbled upon a phone book from a nearby town still wrapped in its plastic sleeve, inexplicably near our fire pit. Chuckling about the eerie coincidence, we teased ourselves with the notion that we might not be alone out there. Later that moonlit night, as we huddled around the campfire, we noticed a shadowy figure traversing the field, only visible by the silver glow of the moon. Initially perplexed, my friend and I debated whether to confront the mysterious intruder. Ultimately, we dismissed it, chalking it up to someone taking a shortcut. Little did we know, this was just the beginning of a series of bizarre events. As the night progressed, we retired to our tents, positioned about 20 feet from the crackling fire. In the hush of the night, we suddenly heard soft footsteps circling the fire pit. Our eyes locked in silent alarm as a piece of wood was flung into the fire, causing it to flare up. Swiftly, I reached for the shotgun stowed in the tent, only to hear the culprit sprint away before we could catch a glimpse. The remainder of that weekend felt surreal, as if the unsettling events of the first night were mere figments of our imagination. Undeterred, we focused on clearing space for the cabin and chopping wood for future fires. Upon our return the following weekend, accompanied by my uncle, the situation took a darker turn. The game cams we had set up to monitor the area had been tampered with, batteries and SD cards pilfered. Our woodpile had diminished, evidence that someone had taken liberties with our property, enjoying a fire in our absence. A disheartening discovery awaited us at the tractor, broken into, and our chainsaw stolen. Reluctant and wary, I hesitated for weeks before resuming cabin construction. The fear that our sporadic presence might invite the unwelcome visitor to settle in lingered in my mind. Apprising local law enforcement and fellow landowners of the situation, we posted no trespassing signs and strategically positioned trail cams around the building site, hoping to capture any unauthorized activity. As time passed, the eerie incident ceased, leaving us to wonder whether the intruder was a transient passing through or a local with nefarious intentions. Uncertain of what the future held, we remained vigilant, ready to act if any further peculiarities arose. About 7 years ago, my wife Mary and our 3 young sons were up at the family cabin we had purchased 6 months prior. From the very beginning, the cabin seemed to hold a mysterious aura, with shadows dancing, lights flickering, and movements catching our attention. Despite the odd occurrences, we brushed them off as quirks of an old building. One particular evening, everyone retired to bed around 10:30 p.m. However, my late-night sweet tooth led me to the kitchen for a sneaky bite of the pan cookies Mary had made earlier. As I was cutting a piece, a sudden chill ran down my spine when I heard a soft female voice whisper, "Hey, what are you doing in here?" Startled, I called out, "Mary," without turning around. When I finally looked, she was nowhere to be seen. Feeling uneasy, I turned back to my task, only to hear a clearer and louder whisper this time, "Hey, are you gonna eat a cookie? I want one." Panicking, I scanned the room, finding no one there. I hurried back to the bedroom, where my wife was still awake and had not been in the kitchen asking for cookies. Despite my apprehension, I made myself go back to the kitchen to clean up after about 10 minutes, but this time, I heard nothing. The following night was eerily quiet until I settled into bed. As I lay on my side, I felt a gentle tug on my sleeve. Turning my head, I heard a whisper, "Mom, Dad." Confused, I rushed across the hall to check on my boys, finding them all fast asleep. In the hushed silence, I caught more words that I couldn't quite make out. Determined to unravel the mystery, I left a recorder running all night in the kitchen, hoping to capture any paranormal whispers. As I listened to the recordings later, the anticipation weighed on me. However, despite my efforts, nothing unusual stood out. A lingering doubt crossed my mind, could someone be playing an elaborate prank, whispering through the vent system? But we were nestled on a solitary road in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by a few unoccupied cabins. It seemed implausible for a prankster to go through such lengths. This story reminded me of a side tale shared by a good friend. In his childhood, he experienced a chilling encounter at his family cabin. Late one night, a drugged and drunk woman stumbled up to the cabin, whispering through the fence pickets. He awoke to a ghostly white face just inches away, an experience that left him terrified in his youth. These unexplained occurrences at the cabin continue to fuel my curiosity and, at times, send shivers down my spine. The mysterious whispers remain a puzzle, and the solitude of the surroundings only deepens the enigma of that old family retreat. In my 40s, I decided to take the plunge and get married for the first time. For our honeymoon, my wife, her awesome special needs daughter, and I chose a cozy cabin in Big Bear Mountain, Southern California. The setting seemed perfect for a 3-day getaway, and little did I know that our adventure would take an unexpected turn on the last night. As the night wore on, my wife and stepdaughter had retired to bed, while I found myself engrossed in late-night TV. The only source of light in the cabin emanated from the glowing screen, casting a dim illumination across the living room and part of the hallway. It was during this late-night TV session that an eerie encounter unfolded, forever etching itself into the annals of my honeymoon memories. With a sudden urge to use the restroom, I reluctantly tore myself away from the television glow and made my way to the bathroom. The act was routine, uneventful, until I opened the door to leave. In that moment, the dimly lit hallway revealed an unsettling sight, my wife walking down towards the kitchen. An innocent assumption led me to believe she had gotten hungry, and so, I decided to join her for a late-night snack. As I followed her, my unease grew. At the end of the hallway, she turned ever so slightly towards the kitchen and, without warning, moved with a speed that defied any human capability. A figure clad in a long, flowing white gown, reminiscent of the one my wife had worn to bed, zipped into the kitchen at warp speed. Shocked and bewildered, I took a few steps back, peering into the room where my wife and stepdaughter lay sound asleep in their beds. To my horror, both of them were undisturbed, peacefully lost in their dreams. It dawned on me that I had just witnessed something beyond the realm of the ordinary. Unable to shake off the spine-chilling encounter, I couldn't find solace in sleep that night. The following morning, we hastily packed our belongings and left the cabin, leaving behind the unnerving specter that had invaded our romantic retreat. Unable to keep the mystery to myself, I reached out to the person who had rented us the cabin. "You never told me the cabin was haunted," I exclaimed. Much to my surprise, the response was nonchalant, as if this was a common occurrence. "Oh, you saw her, huh?" the guy casually remarked, acknowledging the ghostly presence that had disrupted our honeymoon bliss. Looking back, I realized that I hadn't explicitly mentioned seeing a woman. The revelation only deepened the mystery, as if the cabin's spectral resident had chosen to reveal itself to me in a way that defied explanation. I couldn't help but wonder what might have happened if the ethereal figure had turned and looked my way. Perhaps, in that moment, I would have involuntarily emptied the remainder of my bowels, forever haunted by the ghostly encounter on our honeymoon night.